Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. Clerk will call the roll.
Alley, Baumgartner, Billinger, Blasey, Bowers, Clays, Corson, Dietrich, Dahl, Erickson, Bagg, Faust-Goudot, Francisco, Gossage, Haley, Holland, Holscher, Kirshen, Cluse, Longbine, Masterson, McGinn, Olson, O'Shea, Peck, Peterson, Petty, Pittman, Pyle, Reddy, Reichman, Schallenberger, Steffen, Straub, Sykes, Thompson, Tyson, Ware, Warren, Wilborn.
Senators and guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to our guest chaplain, Richard Lowley from the Church Ambassador Network, a guest of Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
And let's pray. O God, from whom come all holy desires, all good counsels, and all just works, give to us, your servants, that peace which the world cannot give, that our hearts may be set to obey your commandments, and also that we, being defended from the fear of our enemies, may live in peace and quietness. Graciously regard those who you have set in positions of authority among us, that guided by your Spirit, they may be high in purpose, wise in counsel, firm in good resolution, and unwavering in duty, that under them we may be governed quietly and peaceably. Merciful Father in heaven, from you comes all rule and authority over the nations of the world, for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do well. Graciously regard your servants who make the laws of this state, and look in mercy upon all the rulers of the earth. Enlighten and defend them, and grant them wisdom and understanding, that under their peaceable governance you would guard them against strife and conflict, and promote a spirit of civility as they go about their work in this chamber and beyond, that your people may be guarded and directed in righteousness, quietness, and unity. Keep this nation under your care, Lord. Bless the leaders of our land, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to the other nations of the earth. Grant that we may choose trustworthy leaders, contribute to wise decisions pleasing in your sight for the general welfare, and that we would serve you faithfully in our generation. As you once shared in our human toil and thus hallowed the work of our hands, we ask that you would bless and prosper those who maintain the industries and service sectors of this land, give them a right regard for their labors, and grant them the just reward for their work, that they may find joy in serving you and in supplying our needs. You bless the earth to make it fruitful, bringing forth in abundance whatever is needed for the support of our lives. Prosper the work of our farmers and all those who labor to bring food to our table. Grant them seasonable weather, that they may gather in the good fruits of the earth in abundance, and proclaim your goodness with thanksgiving. Lord God, you've called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. Blessed Lord Jesus, at this hour, you hung upon the cross, stretching out your loving arms to embrace the world in your death, and we ask that you would grant all people of the earth that they would look to you and see their salvation. For your mercy's sake, we pray. In the most holy and precious name of Jesus, amen.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. On a point of personal privilege, the chair recognizes the senator from Shawnee, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure today to welcome the candidates for the Kansas Youth of the Year for the Boys and Girls Club, and they're sitting over here in our special area. So thank you to those of you that were able to attend the dinner last night. The Boys and Girls Clubs of America provide a safe and positive environment for young people to learn and grow and become productive adults. Founded in 1860, the Boys and Girls Club of America focuses on underserved communities, helping young people achieve success, develop healthy lifestyles, and build strong character and leadership skills. The Kansas Alliance of the Boys and Girls Clubs is composed of 12 local organizations. They currently operate over 70 sites in 19 communities and on military bases in Kansas. The clubs serve youth aged 5 to 18, focused on out-of-school programs. In 2022, Kansas clubs served over 20,000 youth. Since 1947, the Youth of the Year has been the Boys and Girls Club's premier recognition program, celebrating the extraordinary achievement of club members. Each year, one exceptional young person from a Boys and Girls Club is selected to be the National Youth of the Year. The National Youth of the Year serves as both an exemplary ambassador for Boys and Girls Club youth and as a strong voice for all of our nation's young people. Youth of the Year participants embody the values of, and I love this, leadership, service, academic excellence, and healthy lifestyles. Candidates emerge from year-round competitions in their local clubs for Boys and Girls Clubs affiliated on youth centers and our military installations. They progress through these state and regional events, culminating in a week-long celebration in Washington, D.C., where one youth is named National Youth of the Year. So with us today are the candidates for the Kansas Youth of the Year who will compete in regional and national competitions. So when I call your name, will you stand up? The first person, Aiden Camfield. Aiden is 14 years old. He's from Manhattan. He attends Manhattan High School and the Boys and Girls Club of Manhattan. Once he finishes at Manhattan High, he plans to attend Kansas State University, go Cats, and study business. Next, we have Zion Burgess. Zion, can you stand up? He is 17 years old from Hutchinson, where he attends Hutchinson High School. The club he attends is the Boys and Girls Club of Hutchinson. He plans to attend the University of Missouri in Kansas City, and after receiving his undergraduate degree, he plans to continue his education in dental school to become an orthodontist. Thank you, Zion. Dakota Dulcing Short. Dakota is 15 years old and attends Topeka West High School. Dakota is from Topeka, of course, and attends the Boys and Girls Club of Topeka, and he hasn't decided yet where he plans to attend college, but he'd like to be a lawyer. Next, we have Brendan Draney. Brendan's from Wichita and attends the McConnell Air Force Base Youth Program at the Boys and Girls Club. He's 17 years old, goes to Andover High School. Brendan plans to attend the University of Kansas, where he's going to study to be a chemical engineer. Thank you, Brendan. Arabella Gipp. Arabella is 16 years old from Lawrence. She attends the Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence and goes to Lawrence High School. She plans to attend Stanford University when she finishes high school and would like to study political science and activism. You should be in the legislature. Kai Wilson. Kai is 16 years old and is from Wichita. He attends Wichita Heights High School and the Boys and Girls Club of South Central Kansas. He plans to attend Fisk University in Nashville, where he plans to study mathematics. So last night, Kai Wilson was named the Kansas Youth of the Year, and Brendan Draney was named the Military Youth of the Year. Congratulations to all of these young people. We wish you all good luck in your future endeavors. Welcome to the Senate.
You are a sharp-looking bunch, and you're way ahead of where I was at your age. Welcome to the Senate. Second point of personal privilege, Chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, if she'll return to her chair. Senator Fauci-Doe.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my pleasure to have Dr. Charla Smith, who was over at KU Med Center in Wichita, and then she was so awesome until, please stand so they can see you. She's now over at the Med Center in Kansas City. Dr. Charla Smith, welcome to the Senate. If you would...
Please note references of bills on page 1 and 2 of the calendar. Please see the March 21st Journal for a report from the following agency, Adjutant General. We're now ready for final action. On this roll call, we will take the following: the bill on page 4, Senate sub for 155. The clerk will read the title.
Substitute Senate Bill 155, an act making and concerning appropriations for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2023, June 30th, 2024, June 30th, 2025, and June 30th, 2026 for state agencies.
Clerk will call the roll.
Alley? Baumgartner? Billinger? Blasey? Bowers? Glaze? Corson? Dietrich? Dahl? Erickson? Fag? Faust-Goudot? Francisco? Gossage? Haley? Holland? Holscher? Kirshen? Cluse? Longbine? Masterson? McGinn? Olson? O'Shea? Peck? Peterson? Petty? Pittman? Pyle? Reddy? Reichman? Schallenberger? Steffen? Straub? Sykes? Thompson? Tyson? Ware? Warren? Wilborn?
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. President. I vote no.
Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Senator from Douglas, Senator Hallwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I cannot in good conscience vote on legislation where the Attorney General's top advisor also serves in the Senate body. This unspoken conflict calls into question the integrity of the Senate budget. For this reason, I vote pass on SB 155. Thank you, and I ask my remarks be spared across the journal.
So ordered. Further explanation? Does any senator wish to change their vote? Seeing none, clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Twenty-three having voted in favor and 12 opposed to the passage of Senate Bill 155, this measure having reached its constitutional majority is hereby declared passed. Before recessing, are there announcements? Senator from McPherson, Senator Wilburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just like to remind everybody, the legislative Bible study is tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., room 142 South. Thank you.
Senator from Riley, Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I forgot to say earlier, I was privileged to have 5 pages this morning and this afternoon. I would like Olivia, Taylor, Addison, Justice, and Maitland to stand up. They're from Riley County as well as Manhattan Middle School. Thank you for being with us. They were extraordinary, and I enjoyed having them today. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to tell the committee, I would like to tell our body that on each person's desk is an invitation for tomorrow. This invitation is regarding the MAP Legislative Day. This is coordinated with both houses and the governor's office. MAP is a collaborative approach that means mobile access partnership. If you haven't seen any of their large trailers or their trucks, they help the unsheltered homeless population. They provide showers, food, etc. They would like to invite you to meet their chef that provides their food. They are serving breakfast and they are serving lunch tomorrow, and love you to come out and see the mobile facilities that they have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. President. Want to announce a revised agenda for Senate Judiciary Committee. Please be on the lookout for that. That will come out this afternoon, and we are scheduling for hearing on Thursday, March 23rd, Senate Bill 317 regarding child sex abuse statute of limitations, and House Bill 2144 regarding the rule against perpetuities. Some other changes to the agenda as well, so please be sure to look into that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you. And you might be able to tell I have pages. They're right by my desk. And my pages are here today from Rosedale Middle School. They're all 7th graders. I have Gabriel and Una and Joseph and Ariano. I did his name right. So this is for all of them, this is their first time to be at the Capitol, and they actually went to the top of the dome today. So they've had a great time getting to see government at work, and they're from Rosedale Middle School.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also have pages today from Lawrence. I'm introducing them to the Senate because they did join me in Agricultural and Natural Resources and in the Utilities Committee, but right at the end of both those meetings. So I'll ask them to stand up, and I hope you give them a warm Senate welcome. This is Gilly Phelan and Cooper Hefty.
Any further announcements? Seeing none, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Republicans will caucus in room 548 upon recess, and I yield to the Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Democrats will caucus in room 287 North upon recess. I yield back to the Senator from Cali.
Senator from Cali.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate recess to the sound of the gavel.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are in recess. Come to order. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Chair appoints the Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate, having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2015. The Chair recognizes the Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren, to explain the bill and adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. You may continue.
House Bill 2015 comes to us from the House Judiciary Committee with strong support from the House, and it does concern protection for our corrections officers, emergency services employees, law enforcement employees, or juvenile correction facility staff for when they happen to come in contact or otherwise exposed to transmission of body fluids from one or more other persons while performing duties within the scope of their employment. What the bill does is it permits the head of the employing agency or entity to create a designee who can order the testing of the person who has transmitted the body fluid. So currently, only the head of the agency or the secretary of the agency can do that. Sometimes that person is unavailable, and these tests have to be conducted very quickly. You can imagine someone in these circumstances gets bit by someone or gets scratched by someone or some other exchange of fluid could happen. So law enforcement brought the bill to the committee, and again, it would allow the agency or the entity head's designee to petition the court for an order requiring the testing of the person who has transmitted the body fluid. With that, Mr. Chair, we did amend it in committee, thinking it was an important piece of legislation for our law enforcement community, including corrections officers and emergency services employees and law enforcement employees, and did make it effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. There were no opponents. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Questions for the Senator from Johnson. Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Thank you. I do have an amendment for the bill.
You have the number for the amendment?
I do have the number. It's 1764.
We'll pause while that's handed out.
I got the number, baby.
Please explain your amendment.
Thank you, I shall. In case somebody was wondering that, hey, he's on the Judiciary Committee. I was in committee purgatory at the time that this bill was heard and worked. And as such, I was not present, and I think I've been excused from any wrongdoing in regards to such. But I read this bill, and I read it from a standpoint of a physician. And one of the basic tenets of taking care of an individual is you test and treat that individual, not somebody else. And this bill has us force testing another individual And that just struck me as a little odd. And as I read the bill further, I never saw any point in this bill where this was triggered with the commission of a crime. So, really there's all sorts of scenarios that could come into play that aren't in the commission of a crime. And so I wanted this to make more sense, again, particularly from a physician standpoint. And so what this amendment does is it requires, what you have to do, you have to present what is it called? Basically an application to the court to get approval to do this. So part of that application would be a letter from a physician saying that by the testing of this third party will affect the treatment of the individual who are doing the testing for, but not on. Because we just want to make sure we're not forcing somebody against their will to be tested if there's no benefit to it. So again, just straight up, that we want a physician's letter. This can be obtained in the emergency room. Say it is somebody bites a policeman and they're invariably going to go to the emergency room. That question comes up right there. They can scribble a note saying, yes, we need to test the individual who did the biting. Because we want to take the best care of the individual, the policeman in this case, as we possibly can. And that really means that we're going to be testing that policeman, that individual. We're going to be putting together a treatment plan for that individual, that policeman. So this is just kind of a check, just a check and a balance to make sure we're doing this right, we're doing this thoughtfully, we're doing this with the involvement of a physician to make sure we're not wasting our time testing the wrong person. Thank you.
Questions for the carrier of the amendment? Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not really a question, just wanted to address some of the comments. I'm not sure what was meant by in committee purgatory, but at no time has the good senator been restricted or otherwise prohibited from participating in committee. I'm not sure what that comment was about, but just wanted to clear it up that nothing untoward was occurred in committee, and wanted to also remind the body that the current law, which this bill seeks to amend, has been in place since 1998, so for 25 years. But I don't have any questions regarding the amendment itself. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
If I may ask the maker of the amendment a question.
You can be recognized to do so, yes.
Thank you. Just a question on, I'm a little confused. It looks like we're supposed to have an idea beforehand that we're supposed to find out which infectious disease test results sought in the application. And I'm not a doctor myself, so I'm wondering how is one supposed to know which infectious disease one is looking for when an officer or someone in emergency services has a fluid from a bodily fluid and they're exposed to that? How would one know, as a doctor, someone who's practicing in the healing arts, know which diseases this potential victim or whoever this person is that they've been exposed to, know which infectious diseases, if it's just any infectious disease? So maybe the good senator could let me know it.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Well, I think that's a very good question, and I think that's more to the carrier of the bill than to the amendment, in that that's a big part of why I want there to be a check and balance on this. Now, because each infectious disease could potentially be different. If you suspect, if the perpetrator, as the case may be, that's not a fair term to use here because there doesn't have to be a commission of a crime. If they're suspected of having a disease or have a medical history of a disease, that would sure help you guide your testing. But no, I agree with him completely that you can't just shotgun test for infectious diseases. So it ultimately becomes more about the patient. As a physician, I'd call them the patient, not that third party. So I think that's exactly why we do need a physician to render an opinion on what's necessary and what would be tested for.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Mr. Chair, very interesting discussion. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I don't know if a shotgun approach, maybe there is a whole spectrum of things to be tested for, but it does raise the concern up about what we are testing for, why. If this is all about a designee, presumably the maker of the original bill, she mentioned that this is to have a speedy access to these tests and this would undermine that notion of the bill in terms of coming up with a designee when the fire chief or the police chief is not available to do this. So it seems counterintuitive to that objective, but then this is out of my area of expertise, so I'm not sure whether to support this amendment or not, Mr. Chair. So I am in doubt. So I may be a no on this, Mr. Chair, only because I think this needs to be explored further.
Further questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say to the body that this bill came to us from the law enforcement community. I really respect the expertise and the thought that the law enforcement community took in putting this legislation together. They expressed to us in committee that this is a small but important change for them, and it did receive 116 votes in the House. I would prefer to keep this clean. I will not be supporting the amendment. I would urge the body not to. I think we have a good, clean bill that serves the needs of our law enforcement, that protects it and serves in our communities, and I would urge the body to vote this down. Thank you.
Further questions for the carry of the amendment?
Thank you.
Seeing none, you may close.
Okay. I wanted to comment on the last statement. Yeah, I too found it very clear in reading this bill that it came from the law enforcement side of things, but it was very clear to me as a physician that it should have had the input of the medical community, and it didn't. And so that's what I'm offering to provide here today. The access to an emergency room, to a primary care physician is readily available, and this isn't about time. There's always going to be some time in these situations to take this small step and make sure that the medical care and the required testing is appropriate. This is just a common sense approach to combining some law enforcement issues with the medical world, and with that, I move my amendment as stated.
You heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Noes appear to have it. Division's been called for. Not seeing 5 hands. Seeing 5 hands. Oh, my apologies. We'll have the ayes please stand. All those opposed, please stand. On a vote of 17 to 9, the motion succeeds. We'll move back to the bill. Any questions for the carrier of the amendment, or the carrier of the bill? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a small but important change for our corrections officers, our emergency services employees, our law enforcement employees, and our juvenile correctional facility staff. So I'm thankful that law enforcement brought this to committee. And with that, then I move that when the committee rises and it reports House Bill 2015 as amended favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2020. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to explain the bill and adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2020 is a bill similar to what we've heard before. It requires that if a shipper or contractor requires a motor carrier, an independent contractor, to install safety devices or take training, that they are not considered an employee. With that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Questions for the carrier of House Bill 2020? Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The carrier would stand for a question.
He shall.
Mr. Chairman, if the the bill could basically elaborate, is this specifically for trucking transportation, or would this be basically local van? Could this be like Uber, Lyft? I mean, could this be all forms of transportation? Is this more like semis? What's this about?
Senator from Sedgwick.
This is about semis. You'll notice it's in Chapter 66 in the motor carriers, the KCC area underneath the motor carrier safeties.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to follow up on that line of questioning, I want to be sure I understand here. We're basically talking about two types of basically operators here of the semi-rigs. Would that be correct? We're talking about basically employees of the company as well as 1099 or independent operators. Are those the two different operators of the semis that are under the scope of this bill?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Is that recognized?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this affects the independent contractors, those 1099 employees, to be sure that if the person hiring them requires them to install safety devices, GPS monitoring, or take certain training, that they are not classified as an employee.
Senator from Douglas.
My question would be, Mr. Chairman, for the carrier then, is are we basically, are the employees subject to the same procedures, rules, regulations, their employer as the independent driver would be, a 1099 driver would be, or is this basically additional requirements being put upon an independent contractor?
Senator from Sedgwick.
The employee, the bonded servant, jointly employed employee, or agent employee would all be required the same requirements.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess then my really thrust of the question would be is that are we on these independent drivers, are they just independent driving? Is the rig owned by the trucking firm, or we say independent, these are truly their own independent operators, their own rigs and everything?
Senator from Sedgwick.
They might lease the rigs, but I believe they're owned. I do not know that for a fact if they actually own, each one owns a rig, or if they're contracting. They may have leased a rig from someone else to drive to do their contracting.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the body's patience, but I guess what I'm getting at is that is the owner, so the independent driver is the owner of the truck, is that owner of the truck actually the carrier of record for the bill of lading, or are we talking about a separate, truly independent owner operator who owns the truck separately and there is no ownership tie of the vehicle to the company who's doing the shipping?
It would be more of the latter.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Okay. And so then my question would, I'm sorry.
You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question would be then is that basically from a commercial liability standpoint, I want to be sure I understand who is commercially liable for accidents of that vehicle if you have the, say, an independent operator. Is the independent operator who carries the insurance in case there's an accident of that vehicle on the roadway? Is it basically the motor carrier who is requiring the safety devices to be used, or is it the independent operator? Who carries the liability insurance?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. It would be the independent operator.
Senator from Douglas.
Okay, and that's why I guess I'm trying to get at is when it talks about a transportation attorney provided proponent testimony is okay, and is that independent operator? Are they basically required by the shipper to carry certain amounts of commercial liability? Could we be having situations of where, in fact, the independent operator with the truck, they're not carrying any commercial liability? And so basically what we have is a situation of the shipper here is basically trying to cover themselves legally, and through the fig leaf of saying, hey, we need you to be able to put on this equipment or whatever, or you didn't follow our policies. Therefore, if there is an accident with that independent operator, that basically the victims won't be able to go back and go after the carrier.
Senator from Sedgwick.
The independent contractor would be the ones carrying all the insurances required by the KCC underneath the Motor Carrier Safety Act.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the bi's indulgence.
Further questions for the carrier of House Bill 2020? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises to report House Bill 2020 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2065. The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Warren, to explain the bill and adopt the committee report.
Thank you. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Please continue.
House Bill 2065 comes to the Senate from the House Judiciary Committee, where it had very broad support. And it was brought to the House Judiciary by a district court judge, I believe, in Douglas County regarding divorce proceedings and name change. Currently, under current law, you can, in a divorce proceeding, which is separate from a Chapter 60 regular civil lawsuit proceeding, you can request your name change to either your maiden name or a former name. If for reasons of you want to be protected from your former spouse, for reasons of abuse, you want to change your name to neither your maiden name nor your former name, you would have to file a separate petition, which is a separate lawsuit in Chapter 60 rather than in your divorce proceeding. And the testimony from the judge was oftentimes those ex-spouses who want to change a name to a name where their former spouse couldn't find, it's usually a her, you would have to file a new lawsuit, which requires filing fees and which also, most importantly, requires publication and notice. And then you are giving your whereabouts to your former spouse about your whereabouts and the name you propose to change to. So it was thought that if we could combine this into the divorce proceeding, it saves judicial resources, it saves time and expense of former spouses who are seeking the name change. And the House Committee on Judiciary amended the original bill to remove reference to maiden name. And we in the Senate committee felt that this was important enough to have it become effective upon publication in the Kansas Register rather than the Kansas statutes book. So what the bill does, again, is upon request of the spouse in the divorce proceeding, you could change your name to a name that's neither your maiden name nor your former name. And the court would have to grant that. So would have to look at whether you were doing it for reasons of fraud or some other bad purpose. But that's the reason that the bill was brought forward, to help former spouses. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd stand for questions.
Questions for the carrier of House Bill 2065? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faust-Cadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the Senator from Johnson.
You may ask.
Thank you. So with that, this is I support this measure, but just for clarification, would that name change to keep that information somewhat private, not just open for the public? I know we have situations where the maiden name versus a married name, even when we're using identification to vote and passports and other issues. But would this then help or allow where that name needs to be changed a little more simpler? So if I wanted to change that on bank documents, etc., so could I then just contact that bank officer and do this? This legislation, would it help simplify that name change in other areas where it might be important? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you. There wasn't any proponent oral testimony in Senate Judiciary. There was in the House Judiciary Committee. I don't see that any of it addressed that particular issue. What would occur if the bill were to become law is the person would have a court order saying my name has been changed to ABC, and you would take that document and use it just as you would if you were changing your name back to your maiden name or a former name, and use it in the same manner.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Mr. Chairman, the gentlelady from Sedgwick, she's so insightful. That's kind of exactly what I was looking for, that you could use that document and take it other places. So no, seriously, good information. A lot of women will benefit from this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator from Johnson.
Further questions for the Senator from Johnson? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you. This bill is a simple measure, but an impactful measure for former spouses who are seeking streamline change of name to save judicial resources as well, and to protect those former spouses who feel they need some protection from a former spouse that had abused a spouse. So I think this is a good measure and would ask the body's support. And also ask that when the committee, move that when the committee rise and report, it reports House Bill 2065 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2089. The chair recognizes the Senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine, to explain the bill and adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Please continue.
House Bill 2089 would modify the reporting requirements for prepaid service plans from annual or semi-annually to annually, and it would also discontinue the payment of annual registration fees. The fiscal note on this bill is $128. This may sound familiar. It was Senate Bill 17 when it came to us originally. We passed that bill 39-0. The House passed this version 123-0. The two bills are identical, except for in Senate committee. Our committee felt very strongly that this needed to be enacted as soon as possible, so we changed it to the register. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for the Senator from Lyon? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2089 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2090. The chair recognizes again the Senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine, to explain the bill and adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The House Bill 2090 would allow the Commissioner of Insurance to set fees in an amount lower than the maximum amount of the fees established in current law. This would give flexibility to the Commissioner to lower fees, but the Commissioner would not be allowed to raise fees above the statutory limit. Once again, this bill may sound familiar. It was Senate Bill 27. When it came through our body, it passed 38-2. This bill passed the House 123-0. Once again, we felt this bill was equally as important as the last bill, and so we changed it to the register to make sure that we could get it enacted as soon as possible. I'll stand for questions.
Questions for the senator from Lyon? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2090 favorably for passage.
You heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to Senate Concurrent Resolution 1607. The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Concurrent Resolution 1607 would serve as Kansas' application to the Congress under provisions of Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution for calling a convention, an Article 5 convention, and it would be limited to proposing amendments to the U.S. Constitution that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for the members of Congress and officials. It would be restricted to these 3 items, and it conforms to 19 other states that have adopted similar resolutions. This is a continuing application for an Article 5 convention, which means until we reached a 2/3 majority of states that have adopted similar resolutions, it would stand and wait for that to happen before Congress would have to call a time and place for the convention, and that would be the limitation of Congress's role. The resolution also has whereas clauses you can read in the bill, but most importantly, if passed, it would limit it to those 3 proposed items and would require the Secretary of State of Kansas to send an enrolled copy of the resolution to the President and Secretary of the U.S. Senate, the Speaker and the Clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives, and the members of the U.S. House and Senate and presiding officers of the Kansas legislative chambers and other several states. So that is essentially it, and with that, I will stand for questions.
Questions for the senator from Johnson, Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Foscato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the senator from Johnson carrying the concurrent resolution.
Please ask.
Thank you. So with the points that you just mentioned that are in the resolution, so just for clarification, would it, so what this resolution, among the things you just mentioned, also just be to allow the states to meet, but not take action yet, if you could clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. There's checks and balances along the way for each of the steps in this process. So the legislature, through this resolution, would just apply for that Article 5 convention. Nothing would happen until 34 of the states had also similar resolutions. And then it would require Congress to propose a place and time for the meeting. And by the way, of these 3 different items that are listed, it doesn't mean that any amendment has to be proposed on all 3 of those items. That convention would be restricted to those 3 items. They may only come out with 1 amendment. And then, of course, after that process happens, it would still come back to the states. Each individual state would have to ratify it, and we'd have to have a 2/3 majority of the states to pass an amendment. So this is just to propose the calling of an Article 5 convention, and that would have to happen first before we ever got to the point of actually concocting or creating any amendments at that convention.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that response because I know a lot of people who are here today in the gallery on both sides have come, you know, for several years now advocating for the issue. And so regarding Senate Concurrent Resolution 1607, just wanted to make that clarification that this is to allow the states to meet first and then kind of move forward thereafter, if that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for the Senator from Johnson, Senator from Brown, Senator Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, and I've had this question for a long time, and I don't know whether the chairman can answer it, but I want to see what he can do. But he just explained that you call a convention, Congress is going to pick the date and the site of such convention, which they could put it clear up in Maine, they could put it clear down in Florida, whatever. The states don't have a say in it. Congress is going to say that. So only through our elected federal delegation can we do that. My question, Mr. Chairman, is, so if we pass this, I want to know the process. I want to understand the process. He's explained the process. If we call a convention that the federal picks the site and date, I want to know how the delegates from Kansas are to be selected. And for those in the gallery, I will just say this. I have asked certain members that support the COS over there. I used to be a proponent, and then I was an opponent. And so right now, I'm not either. But I want an answer to my question. I beg for an answer to my question. How are the delegates selected? So I proposed to a member that we introduced a bill, it's been a couple years back, for a delegate selection process, because I think that's necessary for me to be able to support a convention. Not absolute, but I would like and prefer that, in preference. So I proposed, well, should we introduce a bill where the governor selects our delegates to a convention? Should they pick a site and date after this all passes enough states? No, we don't want the governor to select them. How about the president of the Senate or the Speaker of the House? Do you want them to select your delegates? No, we don't want that. How about we put them for statewide elections? So we're going to bear the cost of sending our delegates, but they got to run for selection. I mean, I heard Mr. Ferris, I listened to the testimony on this, and Mr. Ferris explained that if 6 members are chosen or 7 members are chosen or 8 members, it doesn't matter how many you send, each state gets 1 vote. So you would caucus the 7 members if 7 was what you chose to send, and if 4 say we're for this and 3 say we're against, then the Kansas vote would be for that measure. I get that. But who and how are we going to select those delegates? I'm asking for an answer. And I've asked the chair to even ask Mr. Ferris for an answer, because there supposedly was one convention. So where's the historical documentation of how the men or women or whoever attended that convention, where's the documentation showing how they were selected? I've had people say that, oh, our federal delegation, our 4 congressmen and our 2 U.S. senators are going to select our delegation. So I ask you, is that true? Can you negate that? And if so, with what documentation? I'm asking one question. What is the process? How do we select the delegates to this proposal? Should we call a convention? Please, somebody get me the documentation. Somebody tell me the answer to my question. Mr. Chairman, if the chair can tell me that, I'm all ears right now. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that because I have looked into it. I've talked to Mr. Ferris several times, even this afternoon. I've read some of the historical documents. Article 5 is silent on that because it leaves it up to the state legislature to select those delegates. And whatever process happens in Kansas would be potentially different from what happens in other states. So it literally leaves it up to the legislatures. The initial process formed by our founders appointed deputies of the states. but it was there's no litigation that provides a document. It is just simply the historical reference of how it happened when they called a convention for the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, and then the 3 additional amendments that were initiated through this process. This process has never actually happened in the fullness of the process. They've initiated it, but they've never actually called an Article 5 convention. So the documents, really, other than the historical reference to how it happened, do not actually exist, other than the fact that we know that the delegates would be chosen by the state legislature and the processes that we do here. So it would be a 2/3 majority, obviously. There would be vigorous debate among the legislatures in both houses, just as we do with any bill, and that's how it would happen. And that's, unfortunately, the best answer I can provide the senator from Brown, and I did ask Mr. Ferris, and that was basically the answer he had.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just ask the question then. So we know there was a convention where the Articles of Confederation were thrown out and the U.S. Constitution was adopted. Can anyone answer as to how the delegates to that convention were chosen? By the, I'm assuming 13 states back then, but someone had to choose those delegates for each of those respective states. I just want an answer. How was it done? But I'm hoping everybody listening can understand. You may want me to represent you to convention. You may want senator to my left. You may want the senator to my right. Right now, that's the big unknown. You don't know who you're going to get. You don't even know the process, whether you'll get to vote on that entity, that person to represent you at the convention. So how do you call a convention when you don't know how you're going to do it? When we organized the state, we knew we were going to draw 40 Senate districts. We knew we were going to draw our House districts. Every county was going to have a representative. The courts changed that, got thrown out, never was appealed. Today, we had a lieutenant governor who ran for lieutenant governor separately from the governor and was the president of the Senate. That got thrown out in the early 70s. All I'm asking is, what's the process? Should we vote for this and enough people vote for it that it moves through the process and we call a convention? What is the process for who we are going to send to represent me and you at that convention? I think that ought to come first. But if we're going to elect them statewide, I mean, does the convention COS people think they're going to pick them? What about the people that are against the COS? Do you want them picking them? Who's going to select them and how? So at least tell me how those delegates were selected at the Constitutional Convention where the Articles of Confederation were thrown out. Mr. Chairman, does he have an answer to that convention as to how those delegates were selected? Thank you.
Senator from Johnson.
Asked and answered. It's the delegates and the rules for selecting those delegates would be selected by the legislature of the state of Kansas. It may be a differing process in other states, but we would set the rules. We would determine the number of delegates that we want to send. And of course, no matter what the size of that delegation, it's still one state, one vote at the actual convention. So we would want to obviously adopt rules that would give us an advantage in trying to promote what Kansas needs and wants in that convention.
Further questions? Senator from Finney, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to piggyback a little bit on the senator from Brown. The delegate is chosen by the state legislature somehow, some ways. We're not convinced how that is. But this is what interests me is, you know, we have a representative government. And I've looked at many polls for the 11 years I've been up here, before I was up here. Medicaid expansion, for example, has been favored by more than 70% of the population. Have we ever voted on it? I've not voted on it in 11 years. Medical marijuana, whether we like it or don't like it, when you poll it, it's polling 60% or higher. Have we ever voted on it? Not in the Senate, they have in the House. Is that reflective of a representative government? Then, something that I supported actually, value them both. Pass both houses by 2/3. Both houses by 2/3. It goes to the populace, and it was defeated 60-40. So I don't question anybody's integrity here. I know all of you. You're all great people. You all have the best interest in heart. But are we reflective of the populace of Kansas when you see statistics like that? So while the legislature is picking the delegates, however they pick them, we get one vote, every state gets that. I guess my question is, how can we honestly get a delegate that would truly represent the populace of Kansas?
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, those are the rules that we would have to promulgate here in this process. We would have rules set, we would have a vigorous debate, we would determine the number of delegates, how many from each party that we would send, and it would be determined. It would have to pass both houses, and it would have to do so in a 2/3 majority. So it would not be a frivolous process. It would be very deliberate, and we would make sure, obviously, none of us here, I think, would take this as a frivolous process. We would want to make sure that we sent the best delegation possible that represented Kansas and our republic, and make sure that those people going to that convention would be sincere about sticking to the rules, because that's how our founders did it. And we would have to look to guidance from history in the process of doing so. If you've got a 2/3 majority of the states that feel this is necessary, Kansas would have to be a part of that process. And so we would have to develop those rules to do so, and do so in a way that would promote our best interests and make sure we were represented well.
Senator from Thinning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's where the problem lies, is our best interest. The best interest of the populace of Kansas, the best interest of the body of the legislature as a whole. I don't know if that reflects a representative government. You know, we all fought really hard to get to our positions that we're in, but I question if we can be, our best interests can truly be represented at a convention that we throw pretty much everything on the table. I believe in term limits. That's why I'm not running again. I mean, this will be my second term. I'm done, because that's what I believe in. And I've told, when I teach in government, that's what I would tell my students. That's my decision. There isn't anything in the conventions of states that we cannot do with our current Constitution. It's just we do not elect people that will carry out the wishes of the people that want the COS to pass. The power is there. There's nothing in our Constitution that we have right now that cannot be done that the conventions of state articles have in it. It's just we don't have, when we elect people, that's not the process. So if we're going to truly represent Kansas, and, you know, other than the Bible, the Constitution is really, really sacred to me. And so if we're going to go around messing with the Constitution, you know, like I said, I taught it for 20 years, that it really means a lot to me. And if we're going to do it, we need to do it right. And I don't think this process will truly represent the populace of Kansas. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to respond to a few of the comments. There are different states that have passed legislation on delegate process. In fact, several: Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, Utah. I think it's interesting because the legislation runs the gamut. One of the states, Indiana, goes as far, if you are a delegate and you go to the convention and do not stay within the resolution's boundary, not only are you pulled from the convention, you go to prison. So Kansas can set those parameters, and we shouldn't let that be the bottleneck. People are frustrated. They're absolutely upset at what is going on with our government. And they see this as a means to try and rein in an out-of-control federal government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Senator from Shawnee, Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No question, just comment, and want to echo what the good Senator Tyson shared. We do have to put our federal government in check, and we all know the definition of insanity. And this is not a thing to take away from our Constitution. This is part of our Constitution. This gives us a way to bring that checking point. And concerning the statement made earlier, we will have time. We've learned a lot from last session concerning this. It's going to take 27 to get it through. But the good thing is there will still be time to adopt the rules and the things that are necessary as far as the delegation goes. And so I rise in support of this. Thank you.
Further questions for the Senator from Johnson? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will make this short and sweet. I don't think anyone with sincerity could argue that the federal government isn't out of control. And I hear from constituents all the time asking for us to push back against that control of the federal government. This is the way we do it. This is a constitutional form of handling it. Article 5 gives us a direction. It proposes the states can call an Article 5 convention. It proposes that we follow that convention and that we follow the rules as adopted by the state legislature. It's as simple as that. So I hope this body will support it, and I move that when the Constitution, or when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Concurrent Resolution 1607 favorably for adoption.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The chair recognizes the majority leader from Cowley, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Alley, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Clays and the chair. Recommended House Bill 2015 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, be further amended by motion of Senator Stephan, and the bill be passed as further amended. House Bills 2020, 2065, 2089, and 2090 be amended by the adoption of the committee reports, and the bills be passed as amended. And then SCR 1607 be adopted.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, to adopt the committee report.
I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 319 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning abortion. Senate Bill number 320 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning health and health care. And Senate Bill number 321 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 319 through 321. Messages from the House. Clerk will read.
Announcing passage of Senate Bill 24, the House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on Senate Bill 14 and has appointed Representatives Sutton, pen, and neighbor as conferees on the part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for the conference on Senate Bill 19 and has appointed Representatives Sutton, Penn, and Neighbor as conferees on the part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on Senate Bill 26 and has appointed Representatives Sutton, Penn, and Neighbor as conferees on the part of the House. The House again accedes to the request of the Senate for the conference of House substitute for Senate Bill 83 and has appointed Representative Williams, Landwehr, and Wynn as conferees on the part of the House.
Reports of standing committees. Clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2335 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Ways and Means recommends House Bill 2290 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources recommends House Bill 2279 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Commerce recommends House Bill 2344 be amended by substituting with a new bill to be designated as Senate substitute for House Bill number 2344, and the substitute bill be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends Senate Bill 297 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends Senate Bill 287 be amended, and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, your Committee on Ways and Means begs leave to submit the following report. The following appointment was referred to and considered by the committee, and your committee recommends that the Senate approve and consent to such appointment. Secretary to the Department of Administration, Adam Proffitt. Mr. President, the Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2082 be passed.
This time I'm withdrawing Senate Bill 193 from the Committee of the Whole, re-referring to the Committee on Judiciary. I'm withdrawing Senate Bill 291 from the Committee of the Whole and re-referring to the Committee on Federal and State Affairs. I'm re-referring Senate Bill 321 to the Committee on Federal and State Affairs. I think we'll stand at ease. We just get handed a committee report and we're going to try to work that in. So we'll be at ease, then announcements, then adjournment. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Commerce recommends House Bill 2336 be amended and the bill be passed as amended.
Are there announcements? Seeing none, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023.
For the motion, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate's adjourned.